Good morning, everyone. It's Carrie, aka Nerdygirlcreates. Welcome to our live stream. Joining me today and returning is Gabe Hernandez, and we are here today to talk about One Piece. Gabe is pretty new to the One Piece manga series, and we're going to start off with the East Blue arc, which is the first arc in the One Piece manga. And Gabe, what are you thinking so far about One Piece?
Um, I'm not a super duper manga reader. I'm caught up on a lot of the different stories, things like One Punch Man, uh, Dragons, not Dragon Slayer, Demon Slayer. Just a lot of the standard shonen type stuff. One Piece is one that I sort of always tap danced around because it just sort of looked goofy to me, to be honest with you. And when
Yeah,
you get into the art, I think that's the one thing that most people that I would associate with are kind of have struggled with One Piece is because the art is a little well, cartoony tends to get overused, but it is kind of cartoony because everybody's sort of very elastic and very stretched, and all the scenes are very exaggerated in how they project themselves. So I've always had a little bit of struggle trying to get into it, but I said, "Darn it, I'm going to get into it." Plus, there's over 1,000 chapters. It can be very intimidating when somebody's
exactly.
thinking about reading into it. But when I started into it and really dug into it, right about chapter 20, chapter 30, you start to see the appeal because there's a lot of great character development and there's a lot of complexity to the storylines that some things that you see in chapter 1 have an effect all the way down in chapter 30 as an example. So there's a lot of great storytelling, a lot of great writing. The art takes some getting used to. It's an acquired taste, but if you can get used to the art and you like great storytelling and very interesting unique characters, I think it's going to be worth your time.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of people who I talked to, the reason they didn't want to read One Piece is because they see the art and they already assume what the story style is going to be. And you actually are surprised as you start to read One Piece that it isn't always cartoony. It gets very serious.
Mhm.
It brings up some topics and uh I think Oda is right now probably one of the best writers in manga.
Mhm.
Do you agree with that?
I would say if he's not the best, he's definitely the top three.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put this up against, say, Black Clover as an example, they're right on par, if not a little bit better. I think One Piece has it over Black Clover for just sheer complexity of story and things paying off down the road, or the intricacies of the relationships, or the kind of the standout collection of characters. And I think that's one of the things that makes One Piece so unique and stand out as much as it does from everybody else is uh, other than maybe Dragon Ball, you have such a wide group of characters that each one have had their moment to shine. They've had some deep backstory stuff going on, and so they're I won't say they're just as important as the main character, which is Luffy the Monkey, but they're pretty close, and they're all treated like as well developed, well fleshed out characters, and that kind of gives it a little bit more of a head start compared to other manga you'll see today.
And you do bring up a good point because sometimes in a manga you have supporting cast that's just kind of there to help the story along.
Mhm.
But in One Piece, every character seems to have their own motives, their own backstory, their own contributions to the plot.
Mhm.
Uh, the first character we get introduced to is, of course, Luffy, who will become the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. What were
Mhm.
your impressions of Luffy the first time you read him?
Well, Luffy's kind of obnoxious when you first meet him. He's
Yeah.
just basically a loud kid that wants to do what he wants to do, or has his ideas in his head about what a pirate could or should be, and he was definitely written to project or portray the lack of maturity. Just a brash kid who's very headstrong and very determined, but just doesn't have any of the wisdom of real life, real world experience. And so now, thankfully, most of that. I won't say you don't get past that in the first issue, but he's only a little kid, little kid in the first chapter, pretty much. And by the end of it, going into the second and the third and the fourth, he's I guess teenager at that point, or
Hmm.
young adult. So that kind of obnoxious phase he moves past pretty quickly. But you can see he's very incredibly determined, which is a mainstay characteristic of most of the main protagonists throughout a lot of the popular shonen titles is the characters kind of small, maybe irritating, maybe immature, but incredibly determined to go after what they want, and that comes through loud and clear, right, almost right from the first page.
I think another thing interesting is despite his fact he wants to become a pirate, he does have a moral code that comes out
Hmm.
in ways like being very protective of people, doing the right thing even though he doesn't want to follow the rules.
Yep. Um, Yeah, I mean, most people would I think just historically or stereotypically think of pirates as just cutthroats that will do whatever, whenever, just to get their gold and just live the life that they want to live. Luffy is different in that respect, even among the pirates that are around him. That he still wants to do the right thing. At his heart, he's still a good guy. It's just somehow in his mind he thinks of pirating as just a sea life adventure, which is
Right.
probably what most people don't think of as pirating. But somehow he got it in his head that that's what a pirate is. It's sea life adventure, and we do all these great things all around the world, and we become the best of what we do. But he sort of it doesn't come into his factor that he hurts people, or that friends are friends as long as you need them, or anything of those nature, anything along those lines. So he does an excellent job of maintaining effectively the heart of a hero, even though he wants to be a pirate. And it always seems to be like a constant battle of the word versus the deed, but somehow he makes it work.
It's almost more like a child fantasy version of a pirate.
Right.
Like, oh, it must be really cool to be a pirate because you're out there on a ship and you're doing whatever you want. Nobody's there to tell you not to do it, and you're just having fun.
Yeah, if anything else, I think the underlying theme that he latches onto is just freedom to explore the world, to go out and do stuff, rather than stay in a small town just living a humdrum life of a shopkeeper or whatever else. So I think that's the biggest thing that he equates with being a pirate, even though that seems to be not what the majority would think of as a pirate.
And I think he inherits a lot of that characteristic from a character he idolizes and
Mhm.
motivates him to become a pirate, which is Shanks, or
Right.
Red Hair Shanks.
Hmm.
Because when you meet him, despite being a pirate, he's very gentlemanlike. He doesn't want to let the bar get destroyed when the mountain bandits show up. He looks after Luffy. He puts himself on the line for Luffy. What else do you think about Shanks?
Well, I think that's probably the core of what drives Luffy for a lot of the things that he does, even though he doesn't say it outright. When you first meet Redhead Shanks and Luffy, Shanks is the kind of the I won't say the local pirate, but he's a pirate that happens to be in the town at the time with his crew,
Mhm,
and how it never really explains the how they got to know each other or how that relationship developed, but it's very clear that Luffy. Uh, Aspires to be like Shanks. He sees Shanks as the kind of pirate that he would always want to be when he wants to grow up and become a pirate. And so that drives a lot of what Luffy does, including the hat, which we'll probably get to in a little bit. The reason why
mhm,
Luffy wears that hat, but also if you just kind of focus on those opening pages, even though it's really not touched on a whole lot later on, but it may come back later, is it seems to me that there's a very clear father-son relationship because you never really see anything about Luffy's family or parents or where he came from. But Luffy treats Shanks like the father he doesn't have or never had.
mhm.
And you see that his very strong desire to be like Shanks is what's motivating him through a lot of what he does. In addition to be wanting to be the king of pirates and finding the One Piece.
Right, and as we were just mentioning, the hat is originally Shanks' hat,
Yep.
which later on people know has a story. And after Shanks saves him, he passes the hat to Luffy as almost like passing the baton,
Hmm.
saying to go for it.
Yeah, that's a powerful um, sort of artifact. I'm trying to think of a better word for it. Basically, it's a totem. That's the word I'm looking
Mhm,
for. It's a powerful totem where Shanks is bequeathing the hat to him, and he doesn't just give it to him. He says, "Find me when you've kind of grown up and become the pirate that you want to be." So
mhm,
in a way, it's not only just here. I'm giving this to you because I see myself in you, Luffy, little kid who's obnoxious but wants to do the right thing. But it's also of I'm giving you a responsibility that you have to live up to. You have
mhm.
to become the pirate that I know you can be, and the pirate that you say you want to be. Here's the hat it's sort of like it's almost like an exchange of a promise ring. You are making the promise that you're going to become the best pirate in the world. Here's the hat. You give it to me when you've lived up to that promise. So just by wearing the hat, even though he doesn't say it out loud, it becomes a symbol throughout the entire series of the promise that Luffy is continually striving to keep.
And I also think it's that moment when he gets the hat from Shanks, you see the tears. It's almost like Luffy knows he has he's got a lot of respect for Shanks, and he
Hmm.
knows that Shanks believes in him, so he wants to prove to him he
Yep.
will achieve this goal.
Yep.
And also during this event, he comes across a mysterious fruit that gives him some weird powers.
Yep.
We're talking about the gum gum fruit, which
Yeah. The gum gum devil fruit.
makes him very rubbery.
Yeah. It makes him rubbery. It's not quite Mr. Fantastic Plastic Man rubbery. It basically allows him. It's more like Stretch Armstrong rubbery.
Yes.
Right, where so he can snap back now. Initially, he doesn't realize that it gave him the power. He ate it because I think he was just hungry,
Yeah,
and when
he's
it was in Shanks's possession or in the possession of his crew, he was hungry. He ate it, and he said it didn't taste that good, but he ate it anyway. He didn't realize what it was or what it would do to him, and initially he doesn't know what it does to him. And then as time goes by, he finds more interesting and creative and powerful ways to use it, which
mhm.
is pretty interesting
Yeah,
for a pirate anyway.
and it gets even more interesting. But
Yep.
then you flash forward to he's 17 and now he just got this little raft and he's decided he's going to take off from the island, build a crew with nothing
Mhm.
and just go for it. And the first thing he does is he runs into another group of pirates,
Yep.
which was Avita, I think her name was.
Yeah, let's see what I got. You had to write it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vita, and she's a large, rotund woman. But that's where you first start to see that there's a time jump. So after the first issue, he's a tiny kid,
Hmm.
super determined but obnoxious as well, and we go through that whole emotional instigation of what he's going to do with his life going forward. Then when you do that time jump and he goes forward, and that's the first real villain that he comes up against, you see that in the interim of that time jump, he figured out his rubbery powers enough to kind of put together some special moves.
Hmm.
And so when people say, "Well, here's Vita, and she's gonna do some terrible things to you, and there's no way you can escape," and he pretty much floors her with one punch, with a gun. I think it's Gum Gum Pistol, I think is the
Yeah.
shot that he uses, Gum Gum Pistol. And by the way, every time he does the special moves, he gives it a name like Gum Gum Pistol, Gum Gum Bazooka, Gum Gum, Gatling gun, and all these other things. So
Yeah.
yeah, you start to see with it very quickly that he's been using his time wisely to kind of train himself up to become what he needs to become to make sure that he succeeds.
I think also another interesting point is he hasn't forgotten what Shanks has taught him because he becomes kind of like encourages another character he meets there named Cody.
Cody. Yep.
Cody, he's been captured by these pirates, and his dream is to become a naval officer
Hmm.
and to hunt pirates. And despite the fact that Luffy will be his enemy, Luffy encourages him to go ahead and do that.
Hmm.
And what did you think about that?
I thought that was actually complicated to pull off. Surprisingly complicated for what you would expect in a manga of this sort. The reason I say that is because you have this. And Cody's like a little bookworm. He's just a tiny guy with glasses, and he is kept around. And that's the key: is every time he encounters somebody of worth, their worth is it's not necessarily how they behave, but it's what they possess that is valuable for somebody who's a pirate. So Cody is very knowledgeable in everything related to the sea, cartography, geography, all the different legends and everything else. So somehow, and I guess you could call it fate or the power of attraction, Luffy seems to kind of draw these people to him that have different capabilities and abilities that would be useful in a crew in the future going forward. Now, Cody eventually is only part of his crew for a short period of time or just with him for a short period of time. But it was surprisingly complicated to see how you had somebody who was working for Alvita who is only with Alvita because he's super knowledgeable about all things related to the seas and the ocean. It's like a walking encyclopedia. And Luffy finds out that he has this dream to become a naval officer, which is in direct opposition to who Alvita is. So Cody feels like he's trapped in sort of
Hmm.
if you want to call it like a toxic relationship almost. But Luffy not only defeats Alvida, but then he uses that opportunity to free up Koei and to encourage him to pursue his dream of becoming a naval officer. Even up to the point where when the authorities come in to arrest Alvida and her crew and everything else that's going on, Luffy has to put on this pretend show of making sure the authorities see that they're not friends so that it doesn't prohibit Cody from being accepted as a naval officer. And then Cody, in turn, in the same way that Shanks gave Luffy the hat and says, "You are now committed and have a responsibility to live up to your promise to become a great pirate," Luffy's almost sort of returning the favor to Cody by saying, "I've put on this show, and I've even allowed us to kind of get into this fight for show to show that we're not friends, so that you can become a naval officer. I've given you this gift so that you can go and do the thing. Now go live up to the promise of what you want to become."
Yeah,
And
and
so, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And Cody picks up on that because he
Yeah.
realizes what he did. Because at first he's kind of like confused, but then it hits him. But
Hmm.
the other interesting thing is he helps Cody get to the island where the naval base is, which is kind of like you're going to walk right into the naval base.
Hmm.
And there he meets another character named Zorro,
Yep.
who is tied up outside, kind of like execution style, but just left there to burn in the sun.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
it
go
goes
ahead.
back to what you were saying about with like Luffy attracting certain people. It's like he automatically, before he even speaks, he knows there's something special about Zorro.
Yeah, he knows there's something special about Zora, and another layer to that is Luffy, wherever he goes, just because he's so determined to fulfill this goal, if you want to call it destiny or fate or whatever, he seems to be attracting these people toward him. But whenever he meets these people, almost exclusively, all of them are anti-pirate when he meets them.
Mm-hmm.
Cody is wants to be a naval officer who is against pirates. He meets Zorro. Zorro is a pirate bounty hunter,
Mm-hmm.
effectively, right? He's been hired to hunt down pirates and do all these things. Later, when we get to Nami, she robs pirates. Usopp basically is a uh, boy who cried wolf liar, but at the same time he does it by warning the townspeople that pirates are coming. So all of them are anti-pirate when he first meets them, but through the course of who he is and how he presents himself, he eventually wins them over, and then their skills and their abilities and their determination then add to his crew in a positive way. Now Zorro is kind of an interesting character because he was already basically an accomplished swordsman in his own right. And then
Mm-hmm.
later on, through his backstory, you'll learn that he has a goal to also be the best at what he does. So
Mm-hmm.
Luffy wants to be the best pirate in the world. Zoro wants to be the best swordsman in the world. And there's a whole backstory about this girl who, who he never really says it outright, but basically, I think he loved her, and then she dies, and then, but there's a promise there that was unfulfilled that he's determined to keep, and then he meets this master swordsman who wants to be. There's a whole thing there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Zorro is kind of that one of those sort of the lone wolf expert fighter that would be is basically a perfect addition to Luffy's crew as he starts. And that's what this is. A lot of these additional arcs are basically building up the fellowship. Right, they're building out the crew, and but each one of them earns that place in Luffy's circle because of who they are, what they can do, and also because of a mutual respect that they eventually learn for each other.
And it's kind of funny because when they first meet, Zorro doesn't take him seriously. He thinks he's just like a kid with some outrageous dreams, and he's just like, "No, go away! I go back to where you came from."
You
And
know,
he's like, "Oh, I'll free you if you join my crew." And he's just like, "Is this kid serious?"
yeah, and you see that over and over again. It's just and that's just the nature of the way Luffy looks. Is
Hmm.
people just underestimate him just on first sight. Um, and I won't say that he's necessarily aware of that, but he
Hmm.
definitely uses it to his advantage by just going on the attack and the offensive like a bulldog. But yeah, there's definitely a lack of respect on the part of Zoro towards Luffy. But what and again, what you see over and over again, he earns it.
Hmm.
He earned that respect because well, I won't say partly, mostly because of the gum gum fruit, because he uses it to free Zoro, but it also he knows that Zoro. And this is kind of what's nice about, or I would say, endearing about Luffy is he doesn't care if you are an enemy of pirates. if you're a good person and you're a friend, he'll still go out of his way to help you.
Mhm.
So even though Zorro's whole job is to act as a bounty hunter against pirates, he frees them anyway.
Mhm.
He doesn't try and like hedge it by saying, "Well, I'll free you, but I'm not going to give you your swords," or "I'm going to give you some food and then going to walk away," or whatever the problem may be. He says, "I'm going to free you because you know you're a good guy, and as a condition to free me, you're going to you're going to be on my crew." And you're gonna, but I hunt pirates. I don't care. You're going to become part of my crew anyway.
And I think what really motivates Luffy to want to get Zoro on his crew is he sees this moment with a little girl who's always sneaking in to try to give Zoro food,
Hmm.
and she gets caught, and the bratty son of the naval, I don't know what it was, like
Yeah,
commander.
yeah. It is. Uh, yeah. Helmopo is the son, and then Captain Morgan, who has the axe hand, is his father.
Right.
If I remember correctly. Yeah.
And they stomp on the rice and they throw her out. And then when Luffy comes in, before he walks away to go get the swords, he goes, "Can you pick up that? I'm gonna eat that."
Hmm.
Even though he kept telling the girl he wasn't gonna eat it. So he's got like this moral code I think Luffy recognizes right away. I mean, the whole reason he's being hung there is because he wants to save the town.
Hmm. Yeah, that's it's definitely something that you pick up is despite what that person's profession will be, if Luffy sees a um, a noble quality in the character, he'll latch on to that because because then what he's doing is he's making a determination that says forget what's on the outside and the gruff, rough, very jagged exterior. If there's a decent heart in you, then I can get behind you. Then I can be your friend, and then the two of us can work together. I can ignore all the foibles and the character flaws because at the heart of it, if you're a good person, then that's somebody that I want to be associated with.
Yeah, and I think after this battle, Zoro then realizes this is somebody he can trust.
Hmm.
And Zoro, despite being a great swordsman, he's got an unusual handicap. He has a bad sense of direction.
Yeah, very bad sense of direction, which is almost a telegraph for who's going to come up next, because the another character that we're going to talk about shortly is renowned and even kept around by her pirate boss because she's basically the world's best navigator.
Mhm.
So in the same way that Luffy just going to goes out and by fate or the power of attraction, whatever else, he's drawing all these people to him. He's also drawing people to him where the strengths of one uh, help complement the weaknesses of the other.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, by Zoro having really bad sense of direction, which makes it very difficult, especially when they're running through the jungles to try and find ruins or a treasure city. It helps that Luffy just naturally, by instinct, is able to find people that complement each other, even though they don't necessarily get along with each other all the time.
I also think it's funny, Luffy has a list of exactly what type of people he wants on his ship,
Hmm.
and his biggest goal is to get a musician. It's like you're sitting there going Zoro does a funny scene where he looks at him and goes, "Well, don't we need the cook before the musician?" Like
Yeah, and that goes back to what you said earlier: is that Luffy has this almost romantic idea about what pirate life is. You'd almost be tempted to think that his whole understanding of what a pirate life should be comes from the Pirates of Caribbean ride at Disneyland, or something like that, where he thinks it's just we're drinking rum, we're singing songs, we're sailing the high seas, and we're burying treasure. But he doesn't really think about how they got the treasure in the first place, which is usually not great stuff. But yeah, his priorities as far as his practical priorities are out of whack, and but for whatever reason, he makes that work, which is part of his endearing qualities about him.
I think also what helps is we were just talking about Zoro, but now we're gonna talk about Nami, is that I
Mhm.
think in the beginning here, Nami and Zoro are kinda like the parents to Luffy,
Yep.
trying to keep him out of doing anything crazy. Because Luffy jumps before he thinks.
Hmm.
He doesn't check the surroundings, he just goes right in, and then they're all panicking because they don't know what's gonna be behind the bush, but Luffy's already there fighting whatever it is.
Yeah, sometimes before they even finish a sentence.
Yeah.
And what's interesting that we're getting into Nami a little bit. Nami is when we start off meeting her, she's an incredibly self-centered and selfish person on the outside. Now, there's backstory to that about how she got that way, and it turns out she has a sort of a very selfless goal, but the way she goes about achieving that goal is incredibly callous and selfish. Because when they first meet, she's a thief, and
Mhm.
she makes her career stealing money from pirates. Now she's trying to steal enough money to do a very certain thing, which will come up later. But the whole
Mhm.
idea there is that um, she's she's a she's occupies that mother figure arena, but in the same way she's sort of eh, if you get killed, you get killed. That's not my problem. I'm just here for the money. And there's a sort of callous self-centeredness and a selfishness about her that, in a way, of all the characters that you meet so far, she's other than the villains, she's probably the least likable when you first meet her. Maybe even
Right.
more so than Luffy, because she is so callous and selfish. And when she sees that Zoro and Luffy are like fighting for this town against against the clown, we'll just call
Yeah, Boogie.
it, yeah, against the clown. She's like, "Oh, if you get killed, you get killed. As long as I get the map, I don't care. That's your problem."
Mhm.
And I think that part of it is you see what they're going through. You see that she has multiple opportunities to kind of step in and help, or just lend a hand a little bit. Just help them, up, or just something. And she's just sort of standing there looking, shrugging her shoulders, saying, "If you die, you die. That's not my problem." And you kind of like are getting annoyed with her, but later on, as you see why she's going what she's doing, you kind of get behind her a little bit. So it works out, but at the same time, she's probably the least likable of the crew members that you meet through the early stages of the crew coming together.
And I think it kinda causes some tension because Zoro automatically doesn't trust her.
Hmm.
And Luffy is just like, "I want you on my crew. I want you to be my navigator." And she's like looking at him like, "Are you crazy? I'm never gonna join pirates." And Zoro's like, "Why do you want this person? She's a bad person." And Luffy's
Hmm.
like, "No, she's my navigator. I've decided." And she's
Yeah,
just kind of like, "No, I don't want that."
yeah. Luffy's the master of affirmations. You're speaking things into existence, basically,
Yeah.
because he can say, "Well, you're just part of my crew now," and even though they say, "No, no, no, I got nothing to do with it," she robs pirates. That's what Nami does. She robs pirates, but for some reason, he's like, "Well, you're a great navigator, and there's something in you," and you can almost smell it. There's
Mhm.
something in you that's part of a good heart. So if you have the skills that I need and you're a good person underneath all of whatever's going on there, then you're part of my crew, and that's it. I've decided. So he's basically speaking with authority, even though he doesn't look it, and nobody gives him any, nobody looks at him with an air of respect. But for some reason he just manages to win them over.
Mhm.
It's definitely great lesson in I hate to sound like a self help guru, but the power of positive thinking and just affirmation and just saying this is how it's going to be, and he just makes it work.
Right, and she puts them through some hell. I mean, she gets them into situations and
Hmm.
anybody normally would just be like, "No, I gotta get as far away from this person as possible because she does nothing but cause trouble," but Luffy is just determined to keep her around and even finally convinces her, despite, she might have some alternative motives, to join the crew, and that's when they end up at Usopp's Island.
Yeah,
But during this time, Zorro and her are constantly fighting.
yeah. Well, I mean, and part of it is too is she's trying to steal whatever they find. She's trying to get them in trouble to make money, even though when it's not in the best interest of what Luffy's trying to do or what Zoro's trying to do. Eventually, at some point, she steals the ship
Mhm,
because she thinks, well, I've had enough of these guys, so I'm just going to steal the ship and everything that's on it to kind of further my financial goals. So yeah, they're definitely the Luffy has this very definite sense of both within himself and in other people of a sort of moral code. Right from the beginning, you got that. Zoro, even though he's a pirate hunter, has that you could tell right away, kind of has that internal moral code as well. And so it's like for like when they're getting together. Nami, when you first meet her, doesn't appear to have any of that.
right.
But there are just little tiny hints that there's something underneath there that Luffy's just latched onto. Um, but the whole idea that she has a moral code is buried really deep to the point that you don't see it, and so that's definitely that puts them at odds very early on because Zoro's trying to do one thing, even though his goals are not aligned with Luffy's, they're at least headed in the same direction. Nami's goals do not appear to be heading in anybody's direction, and they don't have to appear to. So, but there's some spark there that Luffy sees that the reader won't necessarily see until much later, uh, and so he just has that. And again, another endearing quality about Luffy is he's incredibly loyal. I mean, you
Mhm.
almost can't break once he's decided that you're his friend. There's almost nothing that can break that because he would only come to that decision if he was 100% sure that there was something in you that that he could latch onto as somebody who was worth being in his circle of friends and potential family.
I also think it's kind of funny, despite the fact that she's masked who she really is, she still somehow holds the position of the voice of reason
Hmm.
because she knows Luffy's gonna get them killed if they keep following the way Luffy wants to do things. So she has to sometimes step in and just be like, "No, we can't do that." And Luffy just goes, "Okay," and then does it anyhow.
Well, yeah, and again, this goes back to the excellent writing. It's a counterbalance. So
Mhm,
up until this point, Luffy and Zoro are both have gotten to where they've gotten to and are headed where they're going based upon largely physical prowess capability. Luffy's got the gum gum fruit; he can stretch. That makes him basically an incredibly adaptable fighter. Zoro is an expert swordsman. I mean, he's pulling out moves that can take almost anybody down. Nami has none of that. She is
no.
not a fighter at all. I mean, she can swing a punch when she needs to, but by and large, she hasn't gotten to where she's gotten to by any physical prowess means. It's always by stealth, deception, basically figuring out how to stay alive within very dangerous circumstances. So she becomes the voice of reason because she knows how to stay alive
Mhm.
when her life is continually under threat of danger. And so again, that's there's a smart writing is you have these two kind of meatheads and she's balancing them out with reason because what they're doing is dangerous for anybody else if it wasn't Zoro and Luffy. They would have long been dead by then. So she's acting out of sort of human or just average human desire for survival when the other two really just don't have that, which is, again, her strength balancing out their weakness.
I also think it's kind of funny, despite the fact that she is the weakest one of the 3,
Mhm.
they allow her to beat them up.
Yeah, it really becomes like a den mother situation
Yeah.
where they're just running around doing all kinds of crazy things, and you can see they're like grabbing them by the ear and pulling them along, saying, "You stop that noise right now because I'm trying to get some sleep, or we got to get to where we need to get to." So it's very much a sort of a mother, but a more like a den mother position where they're more like instead of father and son and spouse and everything else, it's really more like her kids in a sort of roundabout way, or at least an older sister.
Yeah. I then we meet a character, like, earlier we were talking about the relationship between Shanks and Luffy.
Mhm.
Usopp is dreaming about his father.
Yep.
He dreams also about being a pirate, but he goes about it a little differently than Luffy does. He kinda, like, makes up a fantasy of pirates coming all the time just to kinda gain attention from the town, but it's kinda had a negative effect on him.
Yeah, he's definitely been pegged as the boy who cried wolf. Uh, and so what he does is it's almost a daily ritual where he just goes running, screaming through the town, saying, "The pirates are coming! The pirates are coming!" When there are no pirates. So he's the grief of the loss of his father, who we actually meet earlier. I think his father was
Yes.
one of the clown pirates henchmen that
No,
got
he was Shanks.
Shanks. I'm sorry,
He
Shanks. That's right.
that's he was on Shanks' crew.
There's too many characters to keep straight.
I know.
But his father really was a pirate, is
Mhm.
kind of the bottom line of that. And he sort of developed this fantasy line. Again, it's playing on that idea of the son wanting to aspire to be like the father, to live up to his father's ideal, even though that ideal might be romanticized and not really accurate. So he lives it, but he does it by establishing this fantasy world with these three little kids that are running around the village, acting like they're part of his crew. So it's all make believe. It's all sort of I don't want to say delusional, but just very much not based on anything other than wanting to be more than you are. And just like everything else, when Luffy gets to town, he attracts these people to him. Now, at least in the early stages, Usopp's value to the crew is not particularly clear. He's not a super strong fighter. He has a very unique slingshot that can
Yeah.
do things with the different kinds of pellets. He can so there's a, but he's very much a coward. At least in the early
Yes.
stages, he's incredibly cowardly, and that and in that same way, as he's almost in some ways he's the opposite of Luffy, where Luffy says, "Yeah, if you can come along if you want to." There's a sort of ambivalence there because Luffy doesn't see a lot of in Usopp that would be value to him as a crew member, but Usopp's like, "Nope, I'm going to be a pirate, and I'm coming with you." And well, that at least at the end of his adventure, he gets there. But yeah, it's almost the opposite in the sense that Usopp is latched onto Luffy and the crew because they are the potential fulfillment of the fantasy that he wants to live up to.
Mhm.
But he has to do a lot of character growth first because when we meet him, he lives in this fantasy world. He's a liar and he's a coward, and so a lot of that has to be overcome with the help of a certain young lady in the village named Kaya to
Mhm.
kind of get him to that place. But he does get to that place, and that I mean, really, that whole arc is the Usopp arc. It's not the Luffy arc; it's the Usopp arc, and that goes a long way towards building him up as somebody that you want to see succeed going forward.
Right, and speaking of Kaya, I think she's the only one besides the 3 little kids that appreciate his stories.
Hmm.
Even though everybody on the outside knows that these stories aren't true, they're kinda comforting to her because of her situation of losing her parents
Hmm.
and not feeling well enough to go out into the world, but he always makes it a point to go visit her, and then he kinda gets revealed, and he feels like he's lost that friend, and then this is once again where Luffy steps in and goes, "Well, we're gonna help you."
Yep. Especially because eventually it's found out that the young lady's name is Kaya,
Right.
uh, and pretty much she like the three little kids is the only one who appreciates Usopp, not necessarily because she believes him, but just because he takes the time to come visit her and to kind of bring some kind of bright spot into her daily life, which she's sick to the point of being bedridden most of the time. She has a very overprotective. Um valet or
Butler.
butler.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what's his name? Kuno, or Kuno's his real name. His name is Klahadore. Klahadore, I think is how you pronounce it.
Mhm.
Uh, and I got notes here because this is too many
I know,
characters.
there's a lot.
I had to write
Yep.
down some names.
Me too.
Yeah. So she appreciates Usopp because Usopp is the only one that really sort of goes out of his way to bring her some bright spot in her day. The
Mhm.
rest of the village pretty much acts like they're annoyed by him because he comes by too early. He screams too much about pirates are coming, and the whole town is pretty much, I won't say done with him, but just they turn a blind eye because he's so annoying that they'd rather not deal with him.
Mhm.
But then, of course, what we
And
find out that is pirates really are coming, and we're not talking about Luffy. So yeah, that whole arc plays out great in the sense that it really gives Usopp a sort of an opportunity to come back into the real world and but not give up on his dream of becoming a pirate at the same
right.
time, saying if you really want this, you have to step out and you have to put yourself on the line, and eventually he does.
And I think that's where Luffy finally realizes there's a potential here for him to be part of the crew.
Hmm.
Because later on, there's another character that get introduced, but this is not a human, this is a ship.
Hmm.
We get to meet the Going Mary, which is a present from Kaya to
It,
everybody.
yeah, yep. Which is, I mean, it's nice that because Kaya, even though she's bedridden, is very wealthy, and so
Yes.
right, and so once they discover, and I'm spoiling a little bit here, that her butler is actually a pirate who's been working undercover for a number of years to eventually get her to change her will to sign all her wealth over to him, so that way when she dies, he inherits it all. So basically, it's a very long con. And then Usopp and the whole crew have to step up to beat this pirate and his uh, very dangerous crew to kind of win that all over. As a reward, Kaya says, "Here's a ship," because up until now, Luffy and Nami and Zorro have been sailing around in basically like a little dinghy. I mean, it's really not much, uh, but this is the first time that they've actually got their full ship with a sail. So, like again, it's one of these things where as they're going through, it's the power of attraction. Luffy just finds a way to kind of bring all the elements that he needs together to eventually come to that place where he's going to fulfill his lifelong dream. At every step of along the way, he's pulling people towards him, helping those people, but also whatever comes out that, even though he doesn't like. Well, let me take that back. I think when they got to the island originally, think they were originally intending to go ask for a ship, or they were looking to
Yeah.
kind of get a ship or buy a ship or find something like that. So they wind up getting it, but they wind up getting it in a completely different way than they thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I think Usopp had told them about Kaya being rich, and then Luffy goes, "Oh, great, we'll just go ask her for a ship." Like people are
Yeah.
handing out ships.
Yeah, that's again, that's the thing about Luffy is he asks for things and goes after things with no real sense of like being grounded in common sense or reality. He just
Right.
says, "I'm going after it. I'm just
Yeah.
going after," and oh, so far so good. He gets what he goes after, uh, and it's just amazing to watch him out about how the creators all kind of weave it together so that it eventually works out. But it works out in a way that you believe. He wasn't just handed the ship. I mean, he had
Right.
to go through a lot to get the ship, as did Usopp, as did Zorro, mostly as well.
Yeah, meanwhile, Nami's robbing the ship.
Well, Nami's robbing the ship and then trying to steal it,
Yeah.
which we'll get to later with when we get to Sanji.
Also, I think the other reason Usopp is attracted to Luffy is because he knew his father, which you get the impression Usopp didn't really know his father. He heard all these stories through his mother.
Hmm.
So he's kinda, like, really intrigued, and he decides he's gonna be their sniper because the father is the sniper for Shanks. And there's a funny scene where they're just using the cannon to blow up rocks.
Yeah, they're trying to do some target practice. It doesn't work out the way they thought it was going to work out,
Yeah.
especially when they're sailing around. They're finding out that some of the rocks are not exactly what they appear to be. Um, and as they get a little bit further down the line, they wind up coming before they get to the part where we meet Sanji. They get onto these little strange little islands where things are just kind of topsy turvy, upside down. Very, I won't say Wonderland, but very sort of weird, strange, magical. Like for example, they get to this one island where they find a box, and the guy that's in the box is just a guy who lives in a box for some reason. Um, and then he's trying to get this treasure, which is way up on this mountain plateau. And then, of course, when they find out, and that one was sort of a kind of a heartbreaker because when they eventually find out that their treasure is not what they thought it was, or not what the guy believed was there. So yeah, Usopp eventually tries to develop himself as the sharpshooter of the
Mhm.
group. He sort of gets there, at least in these first few hundred chapters anyway. He sort of gets there, but instead of using guns, he uses slingshots with pellets that do a number of different things, which is bizarre, but kind of neat at the same time. I don't think well, at least not in these early stages, he doesn't reach the level of fighting prowess of Zorro as an example. But he makes himself useful, and as time goes on, he becomes more useful, and his cowardice is continually tested to the point where he has to eventually overcome it. And I think that's a story arc that, even though it's kind of a little he's a sort of a goofy guy, but you can appreciate that he's growing just as much as everybody else is on the ship.
Mhm. And then, yeah, the guy in the box, it was kind of also a nice scene because again, Luffy once again recognizes something about somebody and offers to take him with them.
Yeah.
But he says he's gonna stay there with all the animals because that's his family now and his friends. So Luffy and them set sail, and they end up coming across a restaurant. I think.
Yep.
Am I jumping too far ahead?
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Yeah, and on this restaurant, of course, Luffy gets himself in trouble and does some damage to the restaurant, and he ends up getting, roped into joining the, kitchen staff.
Yeah, I mean, again, that goes back to Luffy's lack of understanding about sometimes things cost money.
Yeah.
You can't just show up and start eating things or overeat beyond what you can pay and everything else. Now, what's notable about this is the first time where you're not dealing with where he comes up into this next arc, which is a fairly significant arc, and again he meets another member that will person who will eventually become part of his crew. That it's not on an island. That's one that's where it's different. And number two, it's not with kids or innocent villagers or just somebody who's outside the pirate life. This is pirate to pirate all the way across.
Mhm,
So it's basically this big, massive floating restaurant. It's on a ship
mhm,
that's shaped like a fish. And what he does is this is a floating restaurant that's frequented by all kinds of sailing ships, but particularly pirates. So the crew and the cooking staff, they're all either current or former pirates. Everybody who attends the restaurant are pirates. So basically, this is the first time we're really diving into being surrounded by other pirates, not just encountering a crew of pirates who's taking advantage of a village, or coming over across a village that's got some kind of trouble with a pesky invader. This is the first time where he's just putting himself directly into the pirate culture, if you want to look at it that way. And that's where he starts to hear things about the Grand Line, and that's
Mhm.
where he starts to hear things about what other pirates who have attempted to go to the Grand Line have encountered. This is the first time Sanji meets basically the person that he knows he eventually will have to beat to be considered the world's greatest swordsman. So this one, the setting is very different than anything they've encountered before, but the model is still the same. Is Luffy's attracting people to him that are going to be beneficial for his life mission, um, and also there's an opportunity for growth, particularly in Usopp, but also for the character who we meet there named Sanji to kind of bust out of a sort of a rut that he's gotten into as far as how he lives his life.
Yeah, and Sanji's a very interesting character because unlike the other ones, he's like his goal is cooking. It's not
Yep.
about really fighting, and he's very well dressed in a suit, comes out, loves the ladies, flirts with Nami,
Hmm.
willing to give her anything for free, and the rest of them are going, "What about us?" And he's like, "You're not a woman." And he's got like also this very charismatic personality.
Yep.
So he's already different from the rest of them. Because his goal is to find the what was it? The blue something. Oh my god. The Grand Blue
Yep.
where all the fish meet.
Right, that's the section near the Grand Line where, right, where you have basically the best fish for the best cuisine and everything to basically create the ultimate dish, if you want to look at that way.
Yeah. And it's like so again, not motivated to be a fighter. But he's also, like you said, in a rut. He's kind of stuck on the ship, and you get a whole backstory on why he's on this ship.
Hmm.
And Luffy decides you're going to be my cook, but Luffy, forgetting his own situation, he's now part of the the kitchen crew.
Hmm.
But Sanji automatically says like, no, he doesn't think so. What are your dreams? Where you're going to go with this? Meanwhile, Zoro's dealing with the whole situation where Nami has taken off with the ship.
Yeah, Nami took off with the ship and stranded them there, basically. So Luffy has to work off his meal, which he eats a lot. I guess being rubbery just takes a lot of calories. The Sanji arc, when we first meet him, is plays on the same idea of the father-son relationship,
Mhm.
because Sanji is there not because of he is paying Sanji's also there because he's paying off a debt, but it's a debt of loyalty, because the master chef is somebody that Sanji looks up to, believe basically he saved his life, and is beholden to him to make sure that he pays off his life debt, if you want to call it that way. But it's very much a father-son relationship. That's also where we learn where Sanji, beyond being a world-class cook, is also a fantastic fighter with the use of his feet, legs.
Right.
He kicks, but his
And
kicks are devastating. They can destroy stuff.
he's developed his kicks because he says his hands are for cooking.
Right. Right. So there's just a strange dichotomy of the hands are for one thing, the feet are for the other. And then he also progresses through learning about a little bit of truth by Luffy's presence and the whole conflict that occurs there. Sanji learns a deeper truth about his loyalty to the master chef, which is why he's remained there, even though he could have long since moved on. And again, it's that father son relationship that plays out sort of, and in a way, this becomes the allegory for a son uh, moving out of the house, basically, where once he learns the truth and he learns, okay, this is why I've been so loyal to you, because I thought this thing happened. And when he learns the kind of the deeper truth of what happened there, he's like, okay, well, I'm loyal to you, and I'll always respect you, and I will always just look up to you. But I fulfilled my responsibility as a son. Now it's time for me to move on into whatever is next in my life. So that whole emotional arc plays out there underneath a pretty big action sequence. So when
Mhm.
the when the kind of rival pirates come, Sanji has effectively a nemesis, the greatest of sword masters that Sanji knows he will eventually need to beat. Then he'll also
Zorro.
then yeah, Zoro. I'm sorry, Zoro.
It's okay.
Uh, yeah, and then Luffy has to kind of stretch his talents and capabilities, especially because his we haven't talked about it yet, by eating the gum bomb fruit and becoming stretchy. And there's different kinds of devil fruits that exist that a lot of the pirates that you will encounter will have different abilities depending on the type of devil fruit they ate. He ate the gum devil fruit, which gives him the stretchy ability. But different devil fruits have different capabilities, so he'll encounter different pirates that have also eaten the devil fruit, but with for different side effects. But the problem with eating the devil fruit is you can't swim.
Right.
So if you get dunked in the water, you sink right to the bottom, which is particularly dangerous if you're going to be a pirate living your life on the ocean. And so that comes up here as a problem in this particular arc pretty heavily, and much more so later when we get to Nami's home island. That comes up in a big way during that final battle.
Right. And we brought up an interesting part about Zorro meeting the world's greatest swordsman,
Hmm.
Mihawk,
Hmm.
which he comes off like Count Dracula. He shows up in this very small little ship. He's got this ginormous cross for a sword.
Hmm.
And it's just kind of like you're looking at this guy going, "This is a pirate."
Yeah, he doesn't come off as a yeah, he doesn't, and that's the thing. A lot of these pirates, they don't look like pirates in the traditional sense. I mean, you're thinking if you've got Captain Morgan and Blackbeard and all these other people, they don't look that way. In fact, a lot of the pirate crews tend to adopt themes. So you'll have like one crew where they look like they're all decked out in 70s disco attire, and you'll have another crew like we saw earlier that
Circus.
they're all yeah, they're circus performers. Like one guy's on a unicycle, another one's riding a lion, another one's a fire breather. So they tend to have themes in a few different ways. That sort of reminds me of that old Walter Hill movie, The Warriors, where somebody's going through New York City, a gauntlet of different street gangs, but each gang has a different like dress theme. So right, so it's very common for you to see pirates that don't look like pirates necessarily, but this is one of the cases where Zorro's encountering the person that he knows he will eventually have to beat to claim the title, the world's greatest swordsman. But that person's yeah, he sort of looks more like something out of the Three Musketeers, something
Yeah.
very sort of cavalier, not cavalier, just like a caballero. So just somebody he's got the hat, but he's got the swishy cape, and it's very sort of European romantic.
There's a
And
bit of goth to it too.
yeah, a little bit of golf, and definitely he exudes a presence where Zoro knows automatically. Yeah, this is not somebody that I can just play around with. This is not going to be an easy person to beat.
Yeah, and during this battle, Zorro realizes he has a lot more work to do before he can defeat Mihawk.
Yeah,
But there's also a respect there with Mihawk towards Zorro that this person will step up and fight him. And then at the end, he goes with the scar. He puts his hands out and he goes, "Cut me in the front because I don't want to be cut in the back," or something like that.
yeah. There's that, but there's something that you just said that I think is also important as well. Is when you see Luffy and Zoro and Usopp and a lot of these characters when they have this aspirational goal that might even for some might even seem impossible. There's always somebody that they know that is way ahead of them, that is that is much more advanced or even much stronger or more skilled or whatever the case may be. When they encounter that person face to face and one on one, the person who when they see they're basically their lesser, it's never met with fear or anxiety or just like, oh, I got to put this guy down to make sure that I'm not dethroned as the best at what I do. There's a sort of they look at them with an air of respect where they say, this is I can see that he has the potential to be better than me. And so instead of trying to put that down, they almost encourage him. They say,
Mhm.
if you want to be the best, you got to beat me. So you better get to work.
Mhm.
Again, it keeps playing on that father-son dynamic where the father, if you're I'm a father, so the goal of the father is you want the kids to be better than you. You
Mhm.
want them to surpass you. And the writer keeps playing on that over and over again of that father-son relationship, that that family dynamic where I don't you want to beat me. I'm going to encourage you through some tough love. I'm going to encourage you to beat me because I want you to be better than me. And this is and that develops that mutual respect in both directions.
And I think Mihawk really sees in Zorro, this is the guy finally worthy enough that could one day beat me.
Right.
So he
The,
could have cut him down and killed him then, but he doesn't.
yeah, it's not only respect for the mutual respect between the characters, it's a respect for the craft.
Yes.
It's like this world needs the best of the best. There always has to be a best. And but the best can only be that role or that position of being the world's greatest swordsman should only be occupied by somebody who's worthy of it, who works to earn it. And if they want to be worthy of it, they have to beat me.
Mhm.
And you see that over and over again of just recognizing that he almost enjoys seeing somebody who has the potential.
Mhm.
It's not a pretender. It's not somebody who's just talking big with a lot of bravado. It's somebody who says, "Yeah, I see the talent in him where he could be better than me, and so I want to see where it goes," because they respect the craft as much as they respect the person.
Yeah, and this is the one thing about manga, and especially in stories like One Piece and My Hero Academia's, you get character development. They start
Hmm.
off at one level and they're motivated to move up the ladder.
Yeah.
And
The,
it's some we're
yeah. Go ahead.
losing that a lot. I'm sorry.
No. You're right. You're right. I would say this is a topic that keeps coming up almost ad nauseum these days. Is what does manga do that what the Western direct market comics aren't doing, or vice versa? Just compare contrast.
Right.
That is definitely one thing that manga does that the Western direct market does not do. Is there is character growth, and it's not a character growth and then retcon, character growth and then retcon. It is character growth and then keep going.
Mhm.
So Luffy today is definitely not the same Luffy from chapter one.
Right.
It's unmistakable. The same thing for Nami. The same thing for Zorro and Usopp and Sanji and everybody else in between. The person when you meet them is different than the person they are today. It's unmistakable, and everything that they've encountered factors into their growth.
Mhm.
You go to the Western direct market, Batman today versus Batman from 5 years ago is practically the same person, or is reflective of whoever's writing him at the time. Things may have happened and they may be incorporated into the canon, but can you say that Batman has grown, or that he's a evolved or matured character today than where he was, say, compared to 5 years ago? The answer is no.
No.
And this is a point I brought up on this one, and Comic Aficionados and a few other places as well, is Western direct market, they seem to be stuck in this perpetual loop of 2 to 3 years where they go through this arc of things happening. Maybe big things happen, maybe some crisis event occurs, and then after 2 or 3 years they just sort of reset, and they just
Mhm.
keep doing you're living the same cycle over and over again. Manga has that beat hands down.
Mhm.
You go through every one of those titles: My Hero Academia, Dragon Ball, um, Black Clover, Bleach, Naruto, One Piece, all of them. The main character from the first day you meet them to the main character as you see them in whatever current chapter they're in has grown and evolved into that place, and they
Mhm.
keep going. Now they don't. They may have spin-off titles and some other things happen, like My Hero Academia has My Hero Academia Vigilante and some other spin-off titles that are occurring, but they never overlap or conflict with the current canonical line,
Right.
and the characters aren't just retcon back into that to try to make that work. So yeah, that's something I definitely appreciate about, because I'm a very much in favor of. I mean, some people will say, what do you like, character driven story or plot driven story? I want both.
Right.
I want both. I want the plot to go somewhere, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I also want the characters to feel like they're moving somewhere. Manga has that in spades.
Yeah.
Something the Western direct market, for the most part, absolutely is not doing in any appreciable way.
No. And it's speaking of with this character growth, the other great thing with Oda, we were talking about earlier how Nami is not likable at all. She's probably the least likable. It's during this part you start to get a glimpse that there might be something more to Nami,
Hmm.
because right before she steals the ship, you see that she regrets she doesn't want to leave,
Hmm.
but she has to.
Right. And that goes back into kind of the backstory. I'm not sure how far we're going to delve into it, depending on the time. Yeah, I think we're okay. Um, when you first meet her, she just seems like a thief. She's just in it
Mhm,
for the money. You eventually start to learn that she's trying to steal the money for a very specific reason, to fulfill, if you want to call it a promise, which is kind of like a contract. Um, but all of that is what you come to learn later is that because she has a great love and affection for a particular village.
mhm.
Now, I'm sort of spoiling a little bit, but we
It's
kind
okay.
of have to say, yeah, kind of have to talk about it to get there. Um, since leaving the village and going on this quest to acquire all this money, Nami has basically put everybody at arm's length because she doesn't care. The goal is to say, get the money so I can buy this village. Is how she terms it. Being part of Luffy's crew is the first time where she started to develop an emotional connection with people
Mhm,
that were outside her village. So she's essentially starting to feel like she's part of a family. Now, it may be a quarrelsome family, and again, she's more like a big sister den mother, which to her might be an annoyance. But at least there's some kind of a fondness, at least.
mhm.
Just something where where she's starting to feel for these people. She cares about what happens to them. And so initially, when you first meet her, she's like, "Well, if you die, you die. That's your problem. It's not mine. I'm just here for the clown's map." When she gets to that point of the story, when they first meet Sanji and she steals the ship, she feels bad because there have been enough interaction between Luffy and everybody else on the crew that she's starting to recognize that there's more to life. There's more that you can care about outside of the village for which you're doing all this stealing and thieving. And then again, that's another important piece of character growth that gets that blossoms out much bigger once we finally get to her home island, which is the big arc that everybody plays on as one of the big selling points of One Piece in the early stages.
And I also think it's interesting because at this point, the rest of them don't know this yet. And
Yep.
despite the fact she's stolen the ship and left, Luffy orders Zoro to get her back.
Yep.
And everybody else is confused. Like, why would you do that? Why would you want her back? She's my navigator. Go get her back. And Zoro, who's now loyal to Luffy, goes, "All right, I'll go get her." Despite being more right now badly wounded by Mihawk, he goes out there with his two bounty hunter friends,
Hmm.
and I think Usopp, to go get her back.
Yep. And then, but exactly plays into that thing that we talked about earlier. Is once Luffy's made up his mind that you are his friend and you are part of his crew, it's almost impossible to break that bond.
Right.
He is the steadfast, dogmatic loyalist. I mean, and again, in a lot of ways, he is something that a lot of people aspire to be. Is that he's not a fair weather friend. If he's your friend, that's it, permanent, done. I mean, there's nothing that's going to break that. At least nothing that we've seen so far up to this point in the story. That may change later, but we'll see. But yeah, even though she's abandoned them on that ship with a bunch of pirates when all this chaos is breaking out, she's stolen their ship. She's stolen whatever money they've collected so far. He's like, well, okay, yeah, she stole it, but just get her back. She's she's my friend and she's our navigator. So just go get her back. There's no sense of you never see Luffy getting when his crew makes mistakes. You never see him getting angry or just giving you the cold shoulder or I hate you, you're not part of my crew anymore. You never see that reaction from him from his crew toward his crew. You may see that reaction towards other pirates, villains, and bad guys and what, but never toward his crew. And so, in some ways, that also makes him the kind of the most favored or cherished type of captain for his crew is because it's somebody that no matter how many mistakes they make, he always considers them part of his crew, and in some ways that's reversing that whole angle of where he's pursuing this lifelong goal for because of Shanks, because of that father-son relationship. In some ways, as he develops and grows and becomes their captain, he little by little starts to assume the father role where I'm the captain, but I'm the father of this family, and I'm keeping you all together. No matter what happens, we're moving forward, and we're all family going together. So little
Yeah.
by little, he starts. he doesn't act like a father, in a mature sense, but he acts like you are all my responsibility. You are all under my protection and care, in very much the idealized way that a father should behave.
And I think the only time I've ever seen him get mad at them is if they expect him to not like them.
Yep,
Expect him to say, "You're not good enough." And that's when I seen him get mad.
yep, yep. It's almost and it's mad. It's mad born out of disappointment,
Yeah.
where he's saying, I don't know why you're talking bad about yourself because you're awesome. I know you're awesome and everybody else around you knows you're awesome. So I don't want to see you talking bad about yourself anymore. It's almost, stop that negative talk. Where
Right.
Luffy's the king of positive talk, he
Yeah.
gets mad when he sees people doing the opposite and like
Right.
speaking negative talk. And he just, yeah. And that's one of the few things that rubs him the wrong way about his own crew.
Right. And now we get Zorro shows up at this island where
Hmm.
Nami is from, and he
Yep.
discovers that it is being held hostage by a group of fishermen pirates.
Yep.
I think they're the Arlong pirates because
Yep.
Arlong's their captain. And he's like this shark, humanoid shark. And they start to Zorro goes there, he gets captured, and he finds out that Nami is on their crew.
Hmm.
And he kind of makes this comment towards her. He goes, "I knew we couldn't trust you." And then they throw him in the water, and he jumps in the water, sorry, and he sees a reaction in her when he realizes he's going to throw himself in the water to drown. And she jumps in and saves him. Then he realizes that point why Luffy trusts her.
Yep. Because even though it's a big gesture, but he sees the reaction. It's a small reaction, but
Mhm.
it's just enough of a reaction to know it's like, and exactly what we talked about earlier is Luffy could immediately pick out that she's got a good heart underneath mountains of rough exterior. That it's all covered by selfishness, self-centeredness, callousness, and all the things that Nami felt like she had to do to fulfill her goal. Um, but once Zoro is in that position and puts her to a test by force, and he sees a little reaction, then he's like, okay, that's what Luffy saw that I didn't. And
Mhm.
then once he picks up on that, now he's accepted her as
Mhm.
part of the crew, and that whole thing plays out beautifully because you absolutely do. The Arlong arc, which is the name of the gang, which is basically holding Nami's home village hostage. That's the big arc that a lot of people point to. They're like, oh, now I get it. I had that same reaction. It's like, I'm with you. Okay, I'm up to about chapter 40, 45. Like, I'm trying. It's okay. I see some good stuff. I see some stuff that's like, it's all right. Okay, when you get to the Arlong arc, that's when the light bulb goes off. And he's like,
Mhm.
oh, now I get it. If we can get more like this, now I get it. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's where you learn. That's where you start to accept Nami is not terrible. That's where the crew around her, besides Luffy, who'd already made up his mind, accept that she's not terrible. And that's where you really see that that thick shell of callousness around Nami's personality starts to crumble a little bit, starts to get broken down. She's
Mhm.
not, she still takes some time to warm up, but the cold indifference cracks away
And I
because you see the heart of what she's fighting for.
Yeah. And it's like a very sad story when you get into the whole back of why she's in kind of being held captive by this pirate. And there's a beautiful scene, and it goes right back again to the hat, where
Yep,
Luffy finally catches up to her and she's on the ground crying, and she looks at him and says, "Help me." And he takes his hat and puts it on her head.
yep,
Now we know how important this hat is to Luffy.
hmm,
It's a sign to show how much he trusts Nami.
hmm,
And he is the next thing he does is he turns around and goes, "Let's go. Let's do this." And the rest of them are waiting and they go off to take down Arlong.
yep. And I think the only thing that would have that's the big moment. That's the big
Mhm.
wow moment. That's the big emotional gut punch is that moment when he puts his hat on her head. Um, that and it seems like over and over again we keep playing on this theme. That's when the role reverses switches just for a brief period of time,
Mhm.
where she's acting like the bigger sister den mother,
Mhm.
Then it switches, and again, at that moment, he adopts a more fatherly role.
Mhm.
He says, "Okay, my baby girl, I'm ride or die. We're in this together. You hold on my hat because I trust you because and Daddy's going to fix this." And when you see that pick up and they start to move forward, and basically they play out the rest of the arc, that's the moment where Luffy broke through to her rough exterior, and at the same time, it's reciprocated.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a big emotional moment that pays off really well, and for a lot of people, that's the moment that hooks you going forward to kind of keep going.
And the other thing is Luffy's trust in Nami is so strong already that
Mhm.
when the sister goes to tell the story what happened, he says, "I don't care. I know her enough to know she's my crew." And he leaves while the other ones get the story.
Yeah, because like, what's so remarkable about Luffy is once he makes up his mind, because he has this unflappable uncertainty about his decision making process. Right, wrong, or indifferent, he knows that once he's made a decision, especially about another person, he's made up his mind about who you are. That's it. There's nothing you can say or do that would change your mind about that. Um, and so, yeah, that kind of underscores exactly his attitude about his crew. That no matter what happened in your past, all that matters is that you're part of my crew, and I'm going to look out for you.
Mhm.
And then we're in this together. You're my friend, and nothing's going to change that. The What that does do is the other members of the crew who are less certain about their about their ability to judge the character of other people, that gives them a greater understanding. So it brings them along to where Luffy has already arrived,
Mhm.
and in a way that helps out the reader, because up to that point she's still pretty unlikable. She's maybe a little bit better, but up to that point, she's been fairly consistent about just being a thief, willing to stab him in the back and do all these kinds of things. But at that moment is where you sort of like switch gears a little bit. It's like, she sort of became the person she needed to be to do what she needed to do.
Right.
And even though Luffy didn't need that, the reader did, and so did her crew. And so that really helped develop her story a lot.
Yeah, and then you see this bond grow with the rest of the crew and her, like, when they're fighting Arlong, there's a great scene where Zoro's getting ready to go up there and he sees her and he just kinda puts his thumbs up.
Mhm. Yeah, and to get a thumbs up from Zorro is a big deal. I mean, he doesn't
Mhm.
praise anybody for any reason, because he's a hyper focused on becoming the world's best swordsman, but B, he's just sort of like, if I don't trust you, or I don't think I'm with you in any way, I'm not going to give you the time of day, or I'm just going to bicker with you, which is what he'd been doing with Nami pretty much the entire time since they met. It's just been nonstop bickering and fighting and arguing and disagreeing and whatever else. So for him to kind of come around to the point where he gave her a thumbs up is a character growth for him,
Mhm.
because he's showing that he can be appreciative of somebody else, and B, character growth for her, because she basically was vulnerable enough to let him, for the two of them to be okay with each other.
Mhm.
And so that was definitely, it's not as big deal as the hat scene, but
Right.
it was a pretty big deal.
Now this fight is interesting because you see it and you're thinking, "Okay, Luffy's going in there and he's just gonna start battling Arlong." Luffy
Mhm.
being Luffy ends up getting himself stuck in a worse situation and leaves it to the rest of the crew to fight Arlong.
Yeah, he gets stuck in a worse situation, but again, that gum gum fruit saved him.
Yeah,
Where basically he gets tossed in the ocean, and they figure it out by stretching
his neck.
stretching his neck and his lips and everything else that they can to keep him above water. So effectively, for most of that fight, he's out of it,
Mhm.
or at least they have to hold their own against the Arlong gang until he can get out of it. So then he can join the fight and kind of help put the whole thing down.
And his
Um,
big entrance is to fling Zorro out of the fight.
yeah, that's just getting them out of harm's way in the least gentle way possible.
Yeah.
Because he sees that Zoro's been pretty banged up, and he's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to get you out of here first. So let's get you out of here by just like flinging you several, several, dozen yards or several hundred yards, however far that was.
Yeah, and he's just laying there going, "I'm going to kill him."
Yep.
And then poor Sanji's trying to be the one who has to get Luffy out of his mess down in the water because he's stuck in concrete too, which I think Luffy did to himself.
Yeah, he sort of did that to himself, and that forces Sanji to kind of I won't say stretch his abilities a little bit, but just figure out, okay, how am I supposed to do these super big kicks that need momentum to gather up when I'm underwater and I'm
Right.
trying to hold my breath and trying to get all these things done. So basically, everybody's fighting on multiple fronts for multiple reasons, and every one of them, I kind of bring it back to what's a good one for that? Like Black Clover does that a lot,
Hmm.
where everybody's told that they have to exceed their limits right at this moment. You are in this big battle where your life and the life of others on the line. Right now, you have to exceed your limitations and you have to do it right now. And that's one of those moments where everybody's fighting on multiple fronts and they're all being forced to do something that they've never tried to do or being asked to kind of go beyond what they've ever done before. And it eventually all works out.
Speaking of that, you have Usopp, who is not there with the rest of them. He's actually leading another guy as far away as possible from the situation. He's kind of using his cowardness to his advantage.
Yep. And you know what? Sure. You know, if cowardice is your strength, use it.
Yeah,
That is one of those circumstances where you can say, yeah, he's definitely acting out of cowardly motivations, but at the same time, it's accomplishing a positive goal.
right.
So, and that's the best you can. I mean, Usopp is not a big fighter. He's not, aside from his slingshot, which he'll use better later, and do a little bit more with later. So he is starting to evolve into that marksman role, like to mimic his father. But if the slingshot's not going to do the job, run away, run very far away, run very fast away, and then make it work. So yeah, he uses it to advantage, and I can't falter for that.
I think he actually defeats the guy, if I remember
He,
correctly.
yeah, he does defeat the guy, but it takes everything he's got and then some. And pretty much by the end of the fight, he's out. He's done.
Yeah.
He's not. He's not getting very far after that. So like you will always appreciate this when the characters fight until they have got nothing left. Now they may win, or in some cases they may even lose, but they will fight until they've got nothing left and until they can't even stand. And I think that's a character growth opportunity for Usopp. That's more subtle. He
Hmm.
fights until he's got nothing left. He might win or he might lose. But what he's doing is he's saying if everybody and I think in his inner monologue, you hear him say this is how can I not fight when everybody else is given everything they've got? And I'm just even though so now I've got to fight this guy. I may not win, but I'm going to give it everything I got. And so even if he loses, you kind of appreciate that he took that step.
Hmm. Notice another thing, and this continues on the series, and I won't spoil that part, but Luffy wins not only over Nami, he wins over her village, her island.
Hmm.
And this is an ongoing theme that you'll see later on as you read. I know you've been further ahead than the blue arc right now.
Yep.
But he wins all the loyalty of these islands, and this one is the first one I would say is be the full island he won loyalty over.
Yep.
Um they also kind of like help him stand up to the navy who shows up. This really corrupt guy who's just been letting Arlong do his thing on this island, and he
Yep.
decides he's going to take the money Nami has been storing for the island.
Yeah. As we get further on past this point, the Luffy and his crew cross paths with the Navy increasingly. So there's more
Yes.
frequency of where they kind of cross paths, usually in a positive way. You'll find in this particular circumstance, the Navy officer they encounter is definitely on the take from the
Hmm.
Arlong gang, because the Arlong gang was paying them to stay quiet, stay out of my way. You let me do my thing, you do your thing, and let the villagers kind of suffer the consequences of whatever however I choose to rule the island. Later on, you do find that there are a few people, one that's particularly important to Zorro, that are in the Navy, but and are fulfilling they're following their orders and doing their duty, but at the same time they're also recognize that Luffy and his crew are sometimes trying to do the right thing.
Hmm.
And it's usually better to either help them in a subtle way so as to not look like they're going against orders, but at the same time also trying to help them if they can, to because they recognize one of the things that Luffy does to measure his success is how big a bounty is on his head. from from the Navy. So he's like, how many berries are on my head this time? And it's like, oh, it's 10 million. Oh, now it's 30 million. And so what happens is Luffy starts getting a reputation by the wanted posters that people find. So as they encounter each new pirate gang, and the pirate gang gets bigger and bigger and more dangerous and more deadly and more serious, they're like, this guy has a 30 million berry bounty on his head.
It's like,
How is this little wimp have it? And then they eventually find out why. But yeah, so the Navy plays a big part in it, in this arc more than any other. But that increases as time goes by. So they keep crossing paths with the navies more and more and more until they get to a point where they're like in some places that the Navy just can't reach.
and I know you're almost to the Water 7 arc.
Yep, yep,
I
yep.
cannot wait to read that, because speaking of the Navy, there's a big reveal coming up in that.
Yeah, I'm towards, for anybody who's watching or listening, I'm toward the end of the Skypiea arc, which is where they definitely go some places the Navy can't reach. Uh, Mainly because it's not in the water, it's in the air. Um, and there's a whole explanation behind that. It's going to sound strange, but it makes sense eventually. But yeah, so as time goes by, the Navy becomes, I would say, a bigger a bigger point of conflict for Luffy and his crew, because now as they're trying to get things done on certain islands, the Navy is trying to either capture them or get in their way or do some other thing. So the Luffy and his crew have to find ways around that to try and fulfill whatever, save whoever they're trying to save on an island, but at the same time avoid getting captured by the Navy at the same time, while at the same time recognize that there are some good people in that Navy that they might cross swords with, but they don't want to hurt.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Navy's kind of like with the pirates. Like
Yeah.
you've got the pirates like Luffy who are good even though they're on the outside of the law, and then
Hmm.
you've got the ones who are terrible like Arlong. Even
Hmm.
within the Navy, you got that kind of same balance.
Yep. And you have in some ways the crew that's in the Navy, or the officers that are in the Navy, are mimicking in a way the crew that's part of Luffy's crew. You have a master swordsman, you have a leader that's trying to do the right thing by his people, that are very loyal to each other, and all kinds of things that are happening. So you see some parallels start to crop up in the Navy that is on the other side of the law, effectively. And if you think about it in retrospect, they have no reason to hunt Luffy. He's never really broken any laws. Every the ship he encountered was a gift. The all the money that they have on the ship was either found because it was like some part of some long abandoned treasure, or is payment or a gift from somebody. So so the strange conflict of it is, if you go back all of Luffy's adventures, at least up to this point, he's never done any kind of bad pirate behavior. He's
No.
always done good things.
Yeah.
And yet everywhere he goes, the bounty on his head keeps increasing and increasing and increasing.
I think it's because he's like interfering in naval business. I don't know.
That, and sometimes their battles make a really big mess.
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
so a lot of the property, it could be property damage, but that's an awful lot of berries from property damage.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
Well, we're going to wrap it up. So what are your final thoughts on the East Blue arc?
Strong start, very strong start once you get to certain points. So that's one of these things where you kind of have to, the if you can get past the art, and I think that's the biggest thing that gets people
Yeah.
uh, thinking that this is something that it's not, is the art. It can be very stretchy, weird, exaggerated, kind of cartoonish, especially on some panels where action's going on. You might have to kind of squint and tilt your head a little bit to figure out, so this person's leg is over here and their mouth is over here, and their
It's like Looney Tunes.
right, it's very stretchy Looney Tunes. And when you're looking at a smaller panel, that's not great.
No.
Because you have to have, and what they do is he uses it, and then there's this fisheye perspective on some of the shots where it's very long like this, and you have to, like, oh, that's a fist over here and his shoulders over here, that means he's stretching, and you have to kind of figure that out. So the art it's an acquired taste. It's something you got to get used to. If you can get used to the art and you're willing to stick with it, you're going to get a lot of character development. You're going to see a lot of emotional beats. You're definitely going to see story progression, right? They're definitely moving towards something. I mean, I can't even fathom where they are I think the current chapter is like 1047. I don't know where I can't even begin to imagine how much further Luffy has to go to become the king of pirates and to acquire the One Piece and do all that stuff. So I don't know if he's close, he's very far, whatever. But you definitely know that they're moving towards something. It may be far in the distance and be near impossible, but it's definitely there. So if you're if you like character, if you like story, if you like seeing all these emotional beats and everything else that's going on, if you can get past the art and if you're willing to be patient, it's going to pay off.
Yeah. And another thing that Oda does great is world building.
Oh yeah,
I know you're only in the early parts, but his world building is like top tier.
yeah. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of. I'm trying to think of some sort of like classic video game, almost like Mario or something like that, or Sonic, where you're visiting these big islands, and or Link,
Kingdom Hearts.
Kingdom Hearts. You're visiting these big islands that has its own aesthetic, and the island has its like all the people have it like a certain mentality. They almost have a culture. They have an attitude. There are certain laws that they adhere to, and all the things that they kind of get used to. And he does that for every location you visit.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, basically, he's constructing a new world with every single arc. And world in the sense of like an island with a village with people and a whole culture and a mentality and a whole history behind it. So I mean, if you're looking for story development and growth and building, there's tons of it in this story. So if you want a story that actually feels like it's going somewhere, you're going to get that in spades in here. I see you in chat. Hey, Tillbonger.
Yeah, getting past the art isn't the challenge. I can't get past 1047. Isn't it the most recent one?
That's the most recent one. Yeah, you got a long way. I look at it this way: if you read 5 chapters a day, you'll get there by the end of the year.
I could tell you, like, when I was out from work because of the coof, because I don't want to say what it was, I was like all into it. I was just sitting there reading and binge reading.
Right,
because
it's very
it's
bingeable.
a good read.
It's very bingeable, from arc to arc. Or I'm saying it's very bingeable, but within an arc. The transition points from one arc to the next, sometimes it gets a little fillerish, a little bit. It's like, oh, we're just kind of sailing and trying to figure out what we're going to do. But once you get into the main arc, it's very bingeable all the way through. And some of the arcs are not short.
Have you tried?
I'm in the Skypiea arc right now. It's not a short arc. That is not tiny. That's a fairly big arc, but it's very bingeable.
I heard the Wano arc is really big.
Yeah.
But have you watched the anime yet?
I have not watched the anime, and I'm kind of like that, where I want to try to consume it all in one medium first before I get the other medium, so I can kind of compare it in my mind and see how it turned out. Now, from what I've been told and what I understand from people I trust, another thing that manga does very well, the anime is pretty much on point with the manga.
It is. It kind of starts off at a different point.
Yeah, which is understandable.
But yeah, and it kind of flows faster that way.
Yeah, well, they have to pare it down. I mean, you can't get every little thought and
right
a bit of dialogue. But again, another point where manga and anime has it over the Western market is, when I get right, Demon Slayer. If I watch the Demon Slayer anime, it is point for point the exact. It's the same thing as manga. And like, well, why would you want to read? Why would you want to? Because then you get the animation of the fights, and then you get to see the movement of the emotional reactions. You get all the things that you can't get on print, and they complement each other perfectly because it's the same thing. You're not getting something different, but somehow it feels different because it's just in a different medium. But they're the same story.
If you read Civil War in Marvel, the movie is completely different from Civil War.
The whole genesis of why Civil War started is completely different. I mean, it's the same philosophical. A bad thing happens and the government feels needs to step in. At that broad level, it's the same, but the details and specifics and who was involved is all different.
Right.
And if I watch, Killing Joke is a seminal, comic work of art. As far as Killing Joke is one of the a lot of people will put it on their top 10 Batman stories. But if you go watch the animated movie, they change it.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
I know.
It's like,
I know. I sit there and watch it and went, "Ugh." Well, we've covered the East Blue arc.
mhm.
Hopefully you'll come back and we'll do I think it's the Baruka Works
Sure,
is the
I'd
next
love to
arc,
come back and talk about it some more.
'cause it's starting to get into, like, I would say the meat of things, like, it's launching them into the adventure itself.
Yep, which would put them, like, on the grand line to finding the One Piece, to becoming the king of pirates, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I would love to come back and talk about it some more.
That's great, and thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone.